race you to the top. Behold the distant streets below. Times I hope to last forever, never older grow. They took my peace, they took my name, my family. In a pallid robe and cryptic code, my destiny. Secret sign, shadows in the moonlight, clandestine. Flashes of a pale white climb the highest peaks of history. On Venetian stone, I climb and climb, but cloaked in dark. Pools of crimson sin on swollen throats, I leave my mark. I take their blood, I hear their last confession seep. I'm the shrouded face of reckoning that haunts their sleep. Secret sign, shadows in the moonlight, clandestine. Flashes of a pale white climb the highest peaks of history. Shadows in the moonlight, clandestine. Flashes of a pale white climb the highest peaks of history.
Hello, welcome to the stream. How y'all doing today? So, what are we working on today? We are working on a bit of a test print, or a test model. This is a just kind of a human commoner, just gal in a dress that I am definitely wanting to work on. She's one of my kind of practice models that I use for testing out new painting techniques, especially on fabric and such like that. We're listening to some more Miracle of Sound today, starting on his second album. And yeah, so yeah, what I'm looking for today is I'm going to work on some reds. I'll grab something real quick. So this is a model, same model that I painted a while ago, and I was testing out yellow. I was really wanting to work on yellow as a, because it's a little bit more difficult to work with, and that I decided to work with some blue and just like really work on some fabric colors. And I was pretty happy with this, especially with the highlights. So I want to work with some red on this today. So that is what we're gonna do. My keys just fell out of my pocket. So, let's see. Where are we starting with? Well, let's start with some base coats. So, I'm mostly using... well, that's the wrong one. Grabbed the wrong paint. I think it's an Army Painter, but it's kind of the official D&D brand. And then maybe some Vallejos today. So we'll see what we got. Okie dokie. So I think what we're gonna do today is, as you can see on this previous one, there's a skirt and a shirt with a bit of a girdle, and I think what I want to do is put red everywhere except the girdle, and then do some edging, maybe some like gold edging on some red, and I really want to see how much dynamic range I can get on this red. And so we are going to start mixing up some paints. Let's see what we got here. Definitely gonna use this one. Okay, got my brushes. There we go. So we're gonna base coat in this cobalt red, and it ends up coming off way more as like a purple. But I found that it's a really good way of building up a nice red. It's great for the shadows and such. So we'll thin this out a little bit, and we're gonna do a couple coats. We're mostly doing base coats here. I really need to get an eyedropper. Or doing kind of a one-to-one paint to water here, just to get nice and thinned out. And yeah, ooh, and I'm gonna actually use my mini holder this time, because this one actually has a base. So let's start going. I like this kind of plum purple here. It's called cobalt red, but it really does end up looking way more like a purple. But man, it's a good base coat. It's a good shade. It's a good mix for getting your red to be not quite so vibrant. Oddly enough, it darkens reds without turning them too blue, which is something that I've run into before. Let's get this in the right angle. There we go. There we go. So a technique I've been using a lot recently is, and something I did with my last model, is building up a glaze, I believe is the name of the technique, where you end up thinning out your paints pretty well. And because I'm doing oh man, that music is a little bit loud for me. There we go. What was I saying? Oh right, glazes. I think the name of it is just basically layered glazing, but you really thin out your paints, and you just get them really thin on your brush too, and then you layer them down very thinly, and it takes a lot longer. You end up doing things kind of painting over the same area multiple times, but it gives you a pretty nice result. Very, very smooth look, and you can bring up highlights and pull down lowlights with some very clean layering. Something I like about this model, and the reason why I use it as a test model, is there's so many great little ridges and highlights and crevices to really focus on doing good highlights and lowlights for fabric. Okay. So I think I'm going to do entire another layer here. And yeah, we're just gonna go for it. I'm gonna give her red all over the place. I think that's gonna work pretty well. Let me just double check something real quick. Okay, I got chat there. Yeah, okay. Now normally if I'm doing a lighter color and I'm wanting to do less saturation and really build up a layer, I would thin this even more, and then I would make sure that the paint on my brush was almost completely off. I would wipe it off on my rag and make it so that there's very little paint on there, and let the body of the brush kind of hold the paint and draw it out and down. But when I'm doing such kind of a heavy-handed base coat here, I don't really feel a need, so my paint's pretty thick. It's only kind of a 1-to-1 with water, which might change depending on what type of paint I'm using or you're using. And last time, I basically only oh, train of thought, I left. Last time I got a little bit too sucked into the details of what I was doing and didn't actually base coat everything first, but this time I'm actually going to try to base coat everything before I start messing with details. So next up, let's see. I think I am going to try to avoid the girdle, painting over the girdle. Kind of the half corset, I guess. Because I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. I might go with a brown. Green could be an interesting kind of contrasting color. I'm not sure that's going to work too well, especially with the almost Christmas-esque vibes you can get off of that. Working around the girdle. Something that's really nice about having an actual model holder is you're not constantly wearing the paint off of your model by bracing it against the table, which is what was happening last time. I was painting a monk for one of my players, it's our player character in my D&D game, and it was a good time, but I didn't have her on her base yet, so I could get better angles at painting, but that resulted in having less, more contact with the bench that I'm working on, which tended to wear a lot of the paint off right after I put it on, which is kind of annoying. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So our kind of mini like tunic skirt here should be dry enough to base coat again. As I said, we're listening to Miracle of Sound, aka Gavin Dunn today. He's based out of Ireland. You can find all his stuff on Spotify and YouTube and such. And he has been so kind as to give basically an open license to anyone who's streaming to use his music as long as you give him a shout out. So I try to do that at least at the beginning, and if not, throughout. Because it's hard to find good music to stream to. So much of it's copyrighted. Another one that I'm sure we'll pop into at some point is StreamBeats. They're run by Harris Heller and I think it's called Senpai Records, which is kind of an amusing name. But he has entire playlists of original music on Spotify that he's commissioned to be commissioned and is copyright free, and so he just gets the streaming revenue, which is not insignificant considering the library he has. So but Gavin's music is stuff I'm more familiar with. I just listened to on my own, or have a lot in the past. So I always like revisiting it. And like his library is huge, so okay, looks like that base coat's done. Clean off the brush a little. So I think we're looking at now. Nope, I messed up at the shoulder. There we go. So now I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to do her skin tone. Yeah, that's going to be interesting. So we're going to try base coat that. So we're using Fair Skin, which is, in all honesty, way too light. But then we also throw in a little bit of Rosy Skin. And that, at about 50-50, gives us the look we're looking for. However, it is definitely well, the Rosy Skin is like really thick. So definitely gonna have to work that in a little bit. And I found if you do this as the base and then just warm it up with a little bit of orange, you end up getting a halfway decent kind of tan and depth. And when you're dealing with miniatures of this size, it's about as good as I can ask for. And we're gonna thin this out just a little bit more. Go. And this is where I'm starting to use that kind of glazing technique, where you load up your brush and then basically just wipe it off. And by the time you're actually painting, it's pretty dry and dries almost instantly. And then you just build up the layers. I'm sure I probably could have primed this a different color, but priming it all gray to start with seems to just kind of be the mid-tone that I'm looking for in the world. And then I can just build up from there. I do know if you're trying to do a little bit of kind of naturalistic looking lighting, you can, especially if you're using an airbrush, you can prime it one direction and then you prime it again, kind of from the top down, spraying it one direction, and that's like your light source with a lighter primer. And then as you layer stuff on, everything else just kind of takes on that slightly lighter tone because you've got that white layer. You're almost good enough for the prime to be done, or the base coat, excuse me. That elbow's gonna be a pain. I designed this model to be relatively easy to work on, and for the most part it is, but there's a couple little nooks and crannies that are a real pain to do. It is my third time painting this model now. Alright, and there's that little gap. Right there. Okay, now we have to figure out hair color. Well, that's going to be interesting. You know what? I'm not feeling too adventurous today, so we're just going to go with a classic brown. And we're going to try to build it up into more of a tan. So let me grab the color tanning for that. Okay. So, the plan is... the good old Dark Souls song. So we're going to start with there's a Vallejo flat brown, which is got a great kind of rich, kind of chocolatey brown look to it. And I think that's going to be my base coat. Not quite thin enough yet. Then what we'll do... That's too thin and too thick on the brush. Yeah, what I like about this brown is it's really rich. Like, almost all the other browns I have are really flat. And a couple layers of this turns any brown into like a real rich brown. You can throw a little red in it and make it have this great kind of like dyed leather look to it. Okay, I put that on. It was a little bit soupy when I put it on, which I'm not a huge fan of. So I'm gonna have to let that dry a little bit. But I think we're gonna go with a brown girdle here. And again, I'm gonna start layering on really thin, super thin coats. Oh, I forgot her hand right there. And a lot of this we're just gonna touch up with a detail brush much later. But right now, we're just trying to block in all the color, get rid of all the gray from the primer. in some of the areas where it's going to be hard for me to reach consistently, sometimes I'll just paint a little bit thicker because it's a little bit harder to see. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit as gloopy. Yeah, there's definitely an element of like what I would call kind of economy of action when painting. Sure, you could do super fine detail on every single piece, but it's like, you know what? Do you want to paint a Celtic knot on the bottom of your, miniatures base? You could, but no one's ever going to see it. Unless you specifically, like, try to show it off. Which, you can, but it's not needed to play, so to speak. So, okay. Sweet. That's basically everything base coated on. I'm going to do one more quick layer over all the hair. And right now, this is a really rich brown. So I think actually what I'm going to do is instead of trying to lighten it, I think I'm actually going to try to darken it. Get a really thin black, wash over it a little bit. Maybe hit up some of the highlights later. But I've had some success with doing a black wash now, turning in kind of this red brown into a really nice kind of like leather look that was absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to see if I can do that again. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Yeah, not even a half hour in and already have the base coat done? I'm happy about that. There we go. Let's see. Excuse me while I adjust some things in the background. There we go. I think that's everything I need. It was a good one. Survivor Craft theme. Heck yeah. Okay. So, I think, where do I want to start with this? I think I'm actually going to keep trying to build up this main girdle here. Because the largest and easiest parts of this model is actually the parts that I want to practice on, which is the red. And it'll be nice to just have everything else done first. So I'm going to work on that. I'm going to work on the hair. Maybe have some fun with that. Get the flesh colors done. Another fun part of designing your own models. I made this in Desktop Hero. And one of the fun parts of this is you can pose your own model, and I've learned quite a bit about posing through animation, which I had an interest in for a while, and learned a bit about how to make a good pose, a good look. And so this model has a good amount of sass, which is fun. So in my mind, she's always some form of barmaid or such. Definitely not a dainty flower damsel in distress, someone who's used to putting up with a lot of crap. There we go. So I'm going to try something a little bit different here. I'm going to put one final coat on the hair here of the brown. And then I'm going to mix up some really, really thin kind of black wash. Like, I'm talking 8-to-1 water with some black. And we're going to see if we can darken this up a little bit. And we're going to see if we can do a little bit of fun lighting tricks here. Where it's a little bit lighter on the top and maybe a little bit lighter on the... a little lighter on top and a little lighter on the tail. I don't know, maybe just a little lighter on top. That's definitely where the highlights are going to go. Again, I need an eyedropper. Now the black that I have here has a ton of, well, super saturated, has a ton of pigment. It's very, 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 very staining. So this is incredibly thin. This is basically a wash at this point. And I'm just going to wait for this brown to dry a little bit more. And let's see. We've got a red dress with a brown girdle. I say we end with gold. That's going to complement both the red and the brown pretty well. Red and silver can go well together, but I'm not sure how well brown and silver goes together. And she's got a little bit of a detail right here, like a little necklace. So, okay, let's get a very small amount of this black here and just start covering up the hair a little bit. Very thin. It's already trying to seek out the recesses, which is pretty cool. And I'm sure it's hard to see on the camera right now, but this barely changed the hair color, which is exactly what I'm wanting. Give it a second or two to dry. Wipe off the excess. Then go at it again. And now I'm look at this, I think I might have a little bit too much water in here. The pigment isn't catching. I'll throw a little more actual paint in there. Let's try this. Okay, that's better. So what I'm shooting for is a feeling of this is dark hair, but there's hints of brown in it. But I think I might actually be overworking it here, not letting it dry enough. Yeah, I feel like I'm just smearing this around at this point. So this needs I need to let this dry a bit. So if that's the case, let's work on a little bit of building up some of the skin tone. So I'm pulling out a more detail-oriented brush. Hey, Captain. Go. So I pull out the detail brush just because trying to get in these little nooks and crannies is definitely a hard one. go. Problem is these little detail brushes don't hold a lot of paint. So it's hard to kind of do that build up of a glaze. There we go. Here's this. Ooh. Oh, that was bad. Didn't wipe off my brush. The biggest problem that I have is I get impatient. I'm just like, it's just fine if I don't wipe off my brush, right? It just means I have more paint that I can work with longer. It's like, no, that's not how it works. There we go. Okay, I'm going to have to turn on the AC here because it's getting a little warm in here. Hopefully, it sounds like a lot of background noise. Maybe, Captain, can you tell me how much background noise you're hearing from the AC? Because it's a little, I don't want it to be disrupting too much, but it's a little warm in here. Hopefully the music is drowning it out. Ah, sweet, it's fine. Yay! Sorry, folks, you will not get to hear me die of heat stroke today. I know it was an oft request situation, but no can do today. I did not catch the back of her arm hardly at all. So yeah, mostly we're trying to work on her hair right now, but I'm having to let it dry. So, while I'm letting it dry, music could be a little bit louder. Okay. Let's try that. I have a hard time balancing it between what I hear versus what you guys hear. Because if it's too loud, then I can't, like, hear myself think or talk. But, okay. Now that we've let the hair dry, let's see if we can do another layer of black here. There we go. Raven hair, red dress. There have been worse combinations in the world. I mean, I could go full anime and go like pink or green, but today we're staying within the safer realms of traditional hair colors. What's happening that's pretty nice is it's pretty naturally finding the recesses. Which is going to give it some good shadow and kind of some natural looking shade. Let's see. I'm going to pull this off stream for a second so I can get a good look at it. Yeah, that's looking pretty nice. We'll have to do some touch-ups around the edges. But that's nice. It's a good... It gives a good... It's kind of hard to zoom in on this. But it gives a good black color. Come on, focus. This camera doesn't like to focus up close. It gives a good black color without it being all black, which is nice. Because just flat black can be a little, well, flat. Okay. I think I'm just gonna touch up a few edges here first. Around the neckline here. When I'm doing little details like this, I've found I can be a little bit more heavy-handed. I don't have to do the exact same, super crazy multi-layer build-ups. Edges again. Definitely need to get that skin tone on the back of the neck. Just gonna creep into the hair, but black has a great habit of covering a multitude of sins. All right. All right. All right, folks. I think this is time for the main event. We're going to be looking at some red. So, I like doing a Dragonborn red because it's really pretty warm. But Crimson Cambion has more of a bluer look to it. And I don't know. I don't know what I want to mix this with. I think maybe we start with the Crimson Cambion, or the Cambion Crimson, which is going to be cooler, and then just try to build it up and get those like really warm highlights. So we're going to need the Cobalt Red first. We're going to add a little more of this. Actually, I should probably be using my other palette for this, but okay, get nice and thinned down. And then we're just going to start adding in. Oh, shake your paints, people. Ugh. Fail. There we go. Now I actually have some pigment in there. We may have to remix this. We'll see. Oh, no, I think that's going to work. Definitely need to thin it out some more, though. I should really be using my other palette for this. I'd waste a lot less paint. But too late now. So, you've heard me say it before, saying it again. Thin paint, thin coats. I'm just going to start building up the layers. I'm almost in this kind of like maroon color right now. And right now I'm putting it everywhere. Full coat. But as we get lighter, I'll be a little more sparing and only hit the highlights. And as we are trying to do the same color for the whole piece, I'm actually going to be painting over all of this several times. And normally I would kind of go section by section, but pretty much her entire outfit's going to be this color. I'm not sure how well you can see, but already this is starting to take on, well, more of a purplish hint, hue. But that's going to get more and more red as we keep adding red. And something I may even do is throw in a layer of orange at one point, very thin layer of orange, just to really try to brighten it up, and then cover it with a red. Alrighty, so that is our first layer, and now we shake our paints. We learned our lesson. And we lighten again. Now, I know I am wasting a lot of paint here. It should really be done on something like a wet palette or something like that, where I can mix individual groups of paint. Maybe I'll start doing that here shortly. Yeah, I'm going to grab my other palette. So I actually designed and 3D printed all my palettes here, which is really handy because it ends up only being what I need. So I'm just gonna transfer some of these colors over here, and then I'll mix them as I need to. Okay. So now I'm going to start really focusing on the ridges as much as possible, and be really heavy on the highlights, and let the lowlights, I'll still cover the lowlights, but they're just not going to get as thick of a layer. And that's gonna hopefully help build up kind of those natural looking shadows. I was hoping for almost a velvet look for this piece, or when you fold velvet, or when velvet kind of folds back on itself, it gets those, as all the threads bunch, they kind of get this weird sheen of almost a darker color. Feeling pretty good about this. Alright, now time for the top. There isn't as many folds up here, so I probably won't be deliberately catching the highlights as aggressively.